Amazing, amazing. I am so beyond excited to be here. And I want to welcome the She Is Me attendees. And I'm sure that your heart and minds are full with all of the other amazing speakers that have been going on over the last 5 days. I've caught some of them, and it's just been so beautiful to be a part of this community that Lisa has created, where we get to empower each other, where we get to share our stories and really come into that realization and breathe into that we are not alone, and just how connected we all are as we move through this journey. And this conference really creates this opportunity, this spaciousness for us to step into life more powerfully and to show up exactly as we are. I love to always say to my students and my clients, it's like we are perfectly imperfect. So it's so exciting to find all of this in this one place. So very excited to be here. And just to give a sort of an outline of where I'm going to go today in our time together is I'm going to start out by taking a few moments to ground us, to just allow us to settle into this virtual space together and like bring us into this present moment. And then I'm going to take an opportunity to share my story and really talk a little bit about how stress came into my life, what my experience was, and then talk a little bit about stress and what it can be doing to our bodies, and then share a couple of tools that you might be able to implement into your life and create that opportunity to just pull back from the stress that might be holding you back. So let's just sort of dive into this grounding. And the invitation is, if it feels really comfortable, placing your hand to heart, softening your gaze so that you can really tune inward, and take a nice deep cleansing breath. Inhale through the nose and just a big exhalation through the mouth, letting out any sounds. And just allow us to come into our natural rhythm of breathing. So just as you're breathing in and out, take a moment and notice how you're feeling in this moment. Are there any sensations in your physical body that you need to shift or move to find comfort and ease? Just taking that opportunity, giving yourself permission to move and to shift. Just allowing yourself to follow the inhalation in, following the exhalation out. And so, just to really bring us into this moment, introducing this idea of these 3 T's. I had my beautiful coach one night show me this as we were navigating our time together. And the first T is to take an opportunity to really tune in. So, if it's possible, turning off any notifications, your phone, really allowing yourself to tune in to our time together, doing what you can. And the second T is to turn up the volume. So if you've heard some of this information or it sounds familiar, amazing. But turning up the volume, like really leaning in and see if it lands a little differently today. Does it offer you a different perspective? Because you are not the same person that you were yesterday or the day before. And just allow yourself to turn up the volume and maybe it lands a little differently. And bringing us into that third T, that transformational willingness. So as we turn up the volume and we open our minds and our hearts to receive this information, we may tap in to that little tiny piece of transformation. So being willing to allow that to occur, to show up, to be open to receive, however it lands for you. So let's just take one more nice deep cleansing breath. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, opening the windows of your eyes, coming back into the space. Always feels so good just to ground, just to really come in and really hold the space together. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, when I'm just sort of going to give some background and then dive into really where stress came in and impacted my life. So I grew up, my parents divorced when I was young, 5, and It was a very interesting childhood full of lessons. My mom was schizophrenic, so I lived with my mom and she was schizophrenic, and my dad had MS. So he was navigating his own illness, working through some of his own stuff. So it was a very tumultuous, traumatic childhood, but one that really led me to be very independent, very headstrong, very, I've got this, I can do this all on my own. Because really, as a child, I didn't have an option to not. It didn't do it, it didn't get done. So as I grew up and I really came into the world, my granny, who's no longer on this earthly plane, but she really helped raise us. And it was, you're going to go to school, get a job, and make a lot of money and get married, right? Like it was, she plotted out my life. And so I went to school, I did what I was supposed to do, and I got a job in personal injury law. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. I really loved it because I got to work with people and support them as they navigated through motor vehicle accidents or disabilities. So I was in this really helper mode, right? This helper mode that I had been in since childhood. So it felt fulfilling. It felt like, okay, I'm on the right path. This is what I'm to do. And then in my own career, it started to bloom and to blossom and grow. And I sort of took on more responsibility. I landed working at a firm of all women, so that was pretty interesting. And when I got into that firm, I was there for about 13 and a half years. And it was a beautiful, strong, independent woman who ran the firm. And then I joined in and grew in my role, and I became a licensed paralegal. So I was holding mediations. I was conducting different tribunals, trying to get benefits for people. So, again, really supporting people in helping them in getting benefits, getting treatment, things like that. And then I also grew into the role of office manager. So then I was dealing with HR and supporting the staff. As the staff were navigating some issues, then I grew in and began to do accounting. And then I was doing social media. So I really kept taking things on. Like it was, the more I could take on, the more I felt productive, needed. And I was happy to do it. And so that was like my work life. I was working probably 50, 60-hour weeks, which was great, right? I felt fulfilled. I was married, still married, just celebrated 20 years. But at the time, with us being so young, we had decided we would put a family on hold, focus on our careers. And so we had a very busy social life, and there was lots of networking events to go to in the field of law. And I also had a very active like workout. So I was a runner and I had started to run 10K races, right? So really push my body, push, push. And maybe for some 10K is not a push, but for me, it was a push. And really, it really felt good in my body, but it was like always taking myself to the next level. Like, how much farther can I go? And then I would practice yoga probably since 2004. I had been practicing yoga, and it was very much a physical practice. So I was doing hot yoga and how many chaturangas, like how hard can I push my body, handstands, all of those things. So very active, very engaged. And then every single time we would get into the Shavasana pose, the final pose, corpse pose, however you know it, I would get up and leave. It's like, nope, got to go back to work, got to do something. My days would start at like 4 a.m., get up, check my computer, go for my run, come back, check my computer, eat, go to work, and then work all day, right? So it was very, very busy. And I just thought, like, I had life by the reins. This was it. There was nothing more that I mean, I was doing it all and it felt great until it didn't. Like, until that moment, it didn't. And what was so interesting for me was started to not feel great. I started to have just some like overall pain. And then I started to have a lot of like, I felt exhausted, like just exhausted. So then I stopped working out. And then I turned to drinking to help me sleep because I wasn't feeling so great. So I'd have a couple glasses of wine, anything that would just sort of knock me out. But then I would wake up middle of the night, not really sleep. And then I started to notice swelling like these little pockets of swelling around my wrist. I could no longer see my wrist bones. I could no longer wear my wedding ring. And then I started to notice the swelling in my knees, my ankles, and I just ignored it. I kept pushing and I kept thinking, oh, when I have some time off, I'll feel better. When I have some time off, I'll feel better. And I think it came to be around December, and my friend's mother was visiting, and she saw the state, like the swelling, and she was like, I think you need to go see somebody. So I went to my family doctor, put me on some medication, anti-inflammatories, and referred me to a specialist. So of course, in I live in Canada, and it takes some time to get into the specialist. So for about 3, 4 months, I was living with this inflammation in my body, this exhaustion. It got to the point before I got to the specialist that my husband would come, walk around to the side of the bed, help me get up out of the bed, and have to walk me down the stairs. It would take me probably 2.5 hours to be able to start moving in the day. I felt awful. Not once did I think I needed to go off work. I remember driving myself to work after having been up for 2 hours trying to move my body. Driving in, sitting at the garage and being like sobbing as the garage slowly, this garage door is opening. Like I can envision it as I share it with you and thinking, how am I going to get through this day? How am I going to make it through this? And it went on for that until I saw my specialist. And I remember the day, it's like burned into my memory, March 1st, 2011. And I went to this rheumatologist and he said, you have rheumatoid arthritis. And I was in my mid 30s. And in that moment, I thought my life was over. It felt like a death sentence. So I got put on some pretty heavy meds. But in that moment, I knew also there was this part of me. So that was sort of like, I felt like my life was over, but there was this part of me that said, you need to go off work. You need to go off work. So I had this, at least this insight that I needed to go off work. And so I got my medication, which was like, I think they described it as it's like a chemotherapy medication, but you only take it once a week. And it was really meant to knock out my entire immune system. So it made me very sick. And I went to work that day and I said, I need to go off, which was my boss was great. I got the time off, like very understanding. There wasn't any ifs, ands, or buts about it. And immediately went off of work, went home, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? So got off work on the meds, and then I made this decision of now I'm going to fight. Now I'm going to go into fight mode. And going into fight mode meant that I went and hired a personal trainer. So I hired this personal trainer to start helping me work my body, even though I could barely move my body. And this was the mentality. It was still in this fight mode. There was no concept that I needed to just slow it down. It was like push, 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 push through, push past. So I tried that for a bit and they created this big package. Ultimately, the story was my husband came in and he was like, this isn't helping. This isn't working. And he was really my saving grace, even though in that moment I didn't feel that he was. And I just ended up one day on a yoga mat. I'd gone in to this yoga class and I talked to the teacher and I said, this is my thing. I just got diagnosed. I can barely move, not sure what to do. And she was so beautiful, so loving. I'll never forget. And she looked at me and she said, Misty, if all you do is come in and lay on the mat and breathe, you are doing yoga. And so, not that I bought into what she was saying. I had all sorts of words in my mind that I didn't believe her, but I did it because I had nothing left to lose. So I went in and I simply surrendered onto my mat and I just breathed. And it was in that moment after the class that I realized that there was something in the stillness and in the slowing down that was going to change my life because I felt better than I had in months just from simply breathing and being still. And so that started my journey on all of this. And so there's lots of other little steps to it to brought me into coming into this wellness and becoming a coach and a yoga teacher and a yoga instructor and a restorative yoga educator. But really what happened was that was like the little seed that was planted and blossomed into where I am today. I ultimately left law. I think it's now we're going into year 6, and I've not returned, and I've created my business, and I've really stepped into wanting to support other women to notice, to see the chronic stress that we go into from the people pleasing, from the caring of everybody in our lives, and finding ways to step back, to pause, to breathe, and to be able to create the life they want without all of this extraneous stress. And so that's really what brought me here, is to talk about stress and to talk about how it really can take us out of life, and not even maybe that we're not aware of it, right? Because when we think about stress, it is a physiological response to what we think and feel is life threatening. And what it really reminds me of is when I'm thinking about stress and thinking about it's about what we think or feel is what we think is life threatening. So, what we perceive to be life threatening. And because we are all so radically unique human beings, we're taking in this information into our own minds, into our own hearts, and it's creating a stressor. So, my stressors will be different from somebody else's because my experiences are much different than somebody else's. And so, it's really starting to get to know, what is it that's causing me this stress? What do I feel is life threatening? What is my perception that is life threatening? So it comes back to really getting to know you, coming back to getting to know your own heart and understanding what it is that is creating this swirl of stress. So I can't sit here today and say that this is what's creating all the stress in your life. Could be numerous things. It could be things that you're carrying from childhood, things that have not been resolved, right? So as I started this talk and shared with you my childhood, it was all unresolved trauma that was held in my body, right? And it was when I started to understand the nervous system and understand the how the body holds on to these emotions, then I could start to release them, right? Through a lot of work, through counseling, through my own coaches, and to be able to find a way to navigate life again. And so we think about stress comes in when we're over responsible. We're over responsible for all of the people in our lives, making sure we're taking care of everybody before we take care of ourselves. Anxiety, putting our minds into the future and worrying about what's to come, can be a sign of stress, right? At a physical level, it can really show up as this exhaustion, this fatigue, right? This you just can't seem to get out of it. Stress on this mental level is this distraction. You can't focus. You're sort of all over the map. You're unable to find focus in what you're trying to do. On an intellectual level, it could really be frustrated, like really quick to anger. And so, really realizing that our source of stress is our thoughts. It's this beautiful mind that we love so much, but it's the thoughts that are constantly running, right? Constantly running, that can create those emotional reactions, that can create that activation of the nervous system, right? And put us into these states of stress. And so, when we think of, pardon me, stress, there's just thinking of two types, right? Really acute and the chronic. And it's really the chronic stress, the long-term stress that is going to impact the body, right? It can create high blood pressure, it can create weight gain, it can create changes in your brain, anxiety, depression, addictions, right? So all of this can be created from living in a state of chronic stress. And the interesting thing about chronic stress is that we can get so used to living in a stress state that we don't really even realize that we're in a chronically stressed state. So sometimes it's interesting to have somebody reflect back to you. I know that I have a client, and when we're engaging or talking, and a lot of times will come up, and I'll just ask, like, are you feeling stressed? Oh, no, this is life. And really trying to reflect back, well, this is what I'm hearing you share. This is what it sounds like. So that maybe they can have that other perspective to see, because if you're constantly living in it, it can sometimes be difficult to be able to be aware of it, to see that you're living sort of in this cycle. And that's the first step to break the cycle, is to drop into the awareness of it. It's to like really be able to pull back and be like, okay, I can see it, right? Like here it is. what can I do now? Like, where can I go? What will support me? What will nourish me? How can I nurture myself to bring my nervous system back down, to regulate my nervous system, to bring in the calm? And so when we're talking about stress, just to give some overview around the nervous system, because I'm throwing that term out there and maybe some people don't really know much about it or know a little bit. When we think about the nervous system, the part that's really engaging with the stress state is the autonomic nervous system. And that's divided into two parts: the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that beautiful part of our system that rests and digests. That's where we get to assimilate life. And then we have our sympathetic nervous system. And that, when it's activated, is really helping us prepare ourselves to fight or flight or freeze. And then there's also a term called fawn. And so when that sympathetic nervous system is activated, that stress response, what the brain is doing is it's perceiving danger, right? And it's sending information out. It's sending information out to the amygdala, which is where we process our emotional processing. And it's saying that there's danger. So it's sending out a distress signal. Then the brain's letting the nervous system know, you need to activate. We need to activate. And so the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and that's like your gas pedal in the car, pedal to the metal, down it goes, and it's triggering that fight or flight response because it wants to provide your body with energy, this burst of energy, to be able to get away from this perceived danger, to be able to be safe. Because your body, oh my God, your body's so amazing. I love our bodies. And they want us to always be safe, and they want us to come into homeostasis. So it's sending out this distress signal. Our heart rate increases. We have hormones pumped into our body, like adrenaline, cortisol, it's pumping in so that we can get into action. Our digestive system slows, our reproductive system slows, our growth and repair of cells slows down, our elimination slows down. So all of the parts that the nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, deems to be unnecessary or sort of non-critical functioning slows down, right? It goes really slows right down so that everything else can go to get us out of danger, right? So we're meant to work this way. We're supposed to do this so we can fight or flight, get out of there and make ourselves become safe. And then we're meant to come back in to that parasympathetic nervous system, that place where we can rest and digest. But the problem in our society, or what my problem was, so I can really speak from the I. My problem was that I was always living in this hyped up state, this stress state, and not even really realizing it. Because, like I said, I just thought, this is life, this is amazing, I love it, and I have everything I want. And so constantly, but I was actually living in this chronic stress state, right? So my body was always on high alert, checking, like, not, and I didn't really even realize it because I didn't know any of this. I knew none of this, but I was living on this high alert. So I was always pumping these hormones into my body, because when we're in this chronic stress state, we might not have the pedal to the metal, but it's like your engine's always revving. So it's always sort of pressing down and sort of pumping these hormones into the body, right? So it's known as this HPA axis. I don't want to get too technical, but what it's doing is it's constantly pressing these hormones into the body. So your body's not getting a reprieve from it when you're living in this stress state. So you're always at this low hum. So you might notice, do you feel like you're always humming, like this low hum? And that is really where it can get dangerous, because when you do it for a long period of time, we're not meant to stay in a stress state for a long period of time. We're meant to come out. That's when the disease comes into the body. And I really believe that that's where my illness came from. And so when I went to, not that I have anything against doctors, I think they're amazing, they do great work, but nobody ever asked me, what is your life like? How stressful is your life? How much do you work? Or what happened in childhood? Like, nobody ever asked me those questions. So nobody ever explained to me my nervous system, what might be happening, none of that, right? It was treating the symptoms that I had, and thankfully they were able to, and go on your merry way, right? So it was once I started to dive in and learn all of this, I realized I was living in this chronic stress state, which really activated my body to move into to burnout, right? And this illness came in. Because I can happily say I have not taken medication since 2016. I've not had to take any medication for my RA. And I'm not saying that's everybody's story, but it's mine. And it was because I started to really learn about my own body and what it needed and to support it and to nurture it. And that made such a difference in how I showed up, right? How I showed up in the world, how I was really able to be and getting to know myself and what my needs were. And so when that stress comes in and I'm noticing it's lasting for a longer period of time, I can be like, oh, breathe, connect. What do I need right now? What can I do to nurture myself? What do I need to bring myself down into my parasympathetic nervous system? So, things that can really activate the sympathetic nervous system or things that might create this state of chronic stress can be our work, because I really feel like sometimes work can have no boundaries, right? Like always on call, cell phones, always make yourself available. Perfectionism, when we always feel the need to be perfect and striving for that perfection. And then when we don't meet that perfection, we move into judgment and we lose that self-compassion, right? We start judging and we have this a lot of inner dialogue. Negative emotions, like resentment can come in, fear, fear of rejection, fear of not being accepted, fear of just not being seen, right? Like really having all of these fears that can arise, that can really create us to pop into that sympathetic nervous system. And if we're always living every day like that, then that can really create that chronic stress state. It was so interesting before I popped on to this webinar to be with all of you, something popped up on my feed about the Sunday scaries, right? And I didn't read too much into it, but I was like, Sundays can be triggering for people because now they're starting a new work week, right? Who wants to start their work week feeling stressed out, right? Who wants that? And it's like, but this is what is normalized in our society. It's normalized that if you're not stressed, you're not doing enough, right? I remember in the environment that I worked, if you didn't say that you were stressed, if somebody asked you, how are you doing? And you didn't say you were stressed, then you weren't doing enough. You weren't working hard enough. Well, if they're not stressed, then they could do more work, right? So it's very much normalized. It's a badge of honor. And if you're not playing into that game, then you can have this, then what can create, if you're not sort of strong in who you are, this fear of rejection, this fear of not being included or fitting in. So it really is almost like an unraveling of all of it and coming home to your heart, right? Being able to notice what you need and being able to notice what you need to nurture yourself. And so I mentioned the parasympathetic nervous system. That's like the brakes on the car. And sometimes you'll hear other people, other experts talk about it as like lifting the foot off the gas. So however feels relevant to you or resonates with you, but this parasympathetic nervous system is like the brakes on the car. And so when the brain knows that we're out of danger, it sends a message and says, okay, danger has passed. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is triggered. Right. And so we want the parasympathetic nervous system to come back because it returns our body to homeostasis. The heart rate slows, our breathing normalizes, our digestive system comes back on track, our reproductive system, our elimination, all of this starts to come back on track. We're able to then really take a moment and assimilate and integrate what's going on, like what is transpiring in our lives, what is really happening. And so it creates that opportunity by coming into your parasympathetic nervous system, right? And we're all born with this optimal blueprint. It's just life and the traumas, they come in and they come in, and we start creating higher set points, but we don't take the time to bring ourselves back down. So we're always like living at maybe at a higher set point. And this is why it's so important to bring in self-care, to take that time to nurture yourself, to take that time to nourish your needs. So I'm not saying that you're going to live no stress. We're meant to have stress. Our bodies are built to have stress. We can manage stress, but what we want to recognize is the need to recover from stress. So, what can I do to really calm myself and bring myself back down into the parasympathetic nervous system to let my body come back into homeostasis as opposed to continuously running on this high state, right? It's so, so beautiful. And I remember my coach, I was listening to her, and she had an analogy of this beach ball in the water. And she said, think about how much energy we use to keep this beach ball pressed down in the water. So if you've ever played that, like you have a ball and you're trying to press it down and hold it down, think about how much energy it takes for you to hold it down, right? And then you let it go. You just let it go. How free and light do you feel, right? And so using all of this energy when we're in a stress state, all of this energy to hold our emotions inside, to hold what we're really thinking or feeling, not really being expressing who we are, and just holding it all down like that beach ball, it starts to build up in our bodies. All of that energy has to go somewhere. So it's going to build up in your physical body. It has to come up and out. And it might not come out in the most productive, and it might come out as like a dis-ease in the body because you're holding for so much. And when you're taking so much energy to hold it all in, we miss out on the present moment, right? We miss out on making decisions that are in alignment with who we are, right? Alignment of our hearts. Because we're living on this hamster wheel, or we're focusing on pushing this beach ball down, and we're not in alignment with our values, with who we are and how we want to show up in the world, right? Because all of the external is impacting us and we're trying to keep it all pressed down. So I just want to talk about two tools that can help you start this idea of taking back your life to help manage some stress and anxiety that might come in. And just to remember that stress is really neutral. Because our bodies are so amazing, it's meant to build resiliency to stress. So it's about coming back and building that resiliency. And once we rebuild the resiliency, you'll be able to navigate the stressors in life, not so much like this, but more like the little waves, right? And if you have something like that, that's okay too, but you'll have tools to be able to bring yourself back online. So the first one is start by tuning in and noticing where you feel the stress. So if you're feeling stressed or anxious, where do you feel it in your body? And so it's really an invitation to check in with your physical body. Is it in your stomach? Are you noticing it in your chest? Right? Noticing where it is, and don't resist it. Don't try to bypass it or override it. Be with it. Just allow it to be there and see if you can start to get intimate with it. Really start describing it. How does it feel? Is it pulsing? Does it feel like a wave? Is it dense? Is it heavy? Does it have a color? Does it sort of undulate? Is it solid? Is it transparent? It's like really like cozying up on the love seat with it, get intimate with it, and allow it to have a voice. So, what would it say? It's like ego, ego loves for us to keep going fast, right? Keep going fast on that hamster wheel. And so with this tool, it's an invitation to slow it down, sort of like coming back and into your body and notice and get intimate with what is arising. If it's stress, if it's anxiety, tune in and notice where it's showing up in the body and start to get intimate with it and breathe into it and then allow it to have a voice. So the invitation is to be with the sensation as it arises. Because if you're chronically stressed, you might be constantly worrying about what's coming next, what needs to be done, who needs to be taken care of. You might have this forever to-do list or this forever checklist, right? This checklist that goes on for pages and pages and pages. And so the invitation is to slow it all down, be with it exactly as it is, and start to give it a voice. And to give it a voice, journal. Just sit down and allow yourself to journal and let it come out. Let it come out of whatever it needs to say, whatever it wants, how it wants to be heard, giving it space. And then you're allowed to just, you'll be able to see what it is, right? So maybe it's, I'm scared my business will fail. I worry my children don't feel they have enough time with me. Or, so it's like whatever's coming through, giving that sensation, that voice, journaling it out, and doing it all without any judgment. So no judgment of, well, that's stupid. Well, I know that's not true, because then we're going to getting into the mind, and we're taking away from this place of really feeling into it. And I mean, that's totally natural. We kind of pop in to our minds, but can you do it without any judgment at all? And just allow yourself the freedom to give it a voice and notice what it's trying to tell you, right? You might look at what you wrote, or you might just put it aside for a bit, give it some space, and then come back to it and give it some attention and some love. And you really are, the main goal is letting it come up and out, right? Allowing that stress to come up and out, giving it its voice and getting intimate with it. It's a beautiful way to do that. So I invite you to play with that, see how it goes, see how it lands. And then the other tool that I wanted to share is to really create an opportunity to presence yourself, right? To presence yourself with the stress that's coming in. So we're coming back into the body. I love working with the body. Love, love, love. Um, really somatically, like noticing what's coming in. And you want to work with it in the body so that you can integrate it back into your nervous system. And so, how do you do that? Well, you do that by every day consciously breathing, right? Yep, we all breathe. I know we all breathe, and we all breathe every single day, but do we consciously breathe? Do we consciously pause and take some deep breaths so that we can really breathe into the sensation that's arising and giving it the space and noticing, am I resisting? Am I trying to override? Am I just trying to push through? Right? I was a huge pusher through, just get by it, just get by it, push, push, push. But now it's like, can you just be with it? Let the resistance be there, but feel into the sensation and breathe into it. So noticing if it is in your stomach, can you pause and take a few breaths and breathe into it and notice as you're breathing, is it expanding? Is it softening? Right? Are you creating spaciousness within it? Is it starting to sort of go out beyond your body? Are you allowing it to stretch your capacity, right? Allowing it to really move outside of yourself so that it's not feeling like it's so tight and stuck inside, just by simply giving yourself these few moments to breathe and to notice. You can do this anywhere. You can do this, like if you're at work, you can go to the washroom and do this. You can do this in your car. You can do this before you go to bed. You can do this as soon as you get up in the mornings. It really can be a beautiful way so that you can feel into the sensations and then show up more present in your life, right? Like it'll help move through them, right? So you're not trying to push them down or hide them. You're giving them space and then gently breathing into them. Right. So that's my second tool. So just inviting you to play with that. And so what I'd love to do, just to get, because sometimes people can feel a little uncomfortable, they're not sure what to do when breathing, is to guide you through a breath awareness practice so that you can play with this and really notice. So it's not necessarily pranayama or like a breath exercise or controlling your breath. It's just simply becoming aware, just becoming conscious of your breathing. So let's just come in together. I'm just going to get my feet planted on the earth and just softly close your eyes or drop your gaze down. Just starting by a deep cleansing breath. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. And just come into your natural rhythm of breathing. So much information. You're so amazing for showing up for yourself here. Just So amazing. And I know it's a lot of information. So just taking this moment to come into your breath and just inviting you to notice the length of your inhalation compared to the length of your exhalation. Noticing the texture of your breath. Is it rigid? Is it smooth? No judgment, just exploring with the spirit of curiosity. Noticing any sensations that are arising as you breathe in and out. Noticing if your breath is changing as you continue to bring that conscious breathing. And inviting you to notice, is there a color that's associated with your breath in this moment? Is something arising as you are breathing in and out? Is the breath traveling deep into the lungs, or do you find it stopping short into your chest? Noticing the temperature of the air that you're drawing in and the temperature of the breath as it leaves the body. And then noticing as you're breathing in, is one nostril feel more open than the other? Just notice. Noticing any emotions that arise as you are simply breathing. And as you're breathing, is there a sensation that's present in the body? Can you allow the breath to travel to the sensation and create a little bit of spaciousness? I'm just inviting you to take a couple more breaths, tuning inward and noticing what you notice with an open heart and open mind. And then allowing your hands to come to heart and just gently letting those thumbs touch the sternum, feeling that gentle lift, shining your heart. Taking one more deep cleansing breath, inhaling through the nose. Exhale through the mouth, letting out any sounds. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, gently opening the windows of your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been such a pleasure and such an honor. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you found this to be helpful.